There comes a time in a man's life when he feels a need to play Red Dead Redemption 2 again. When I finished playing Red Dead Redemption 2 in 2018, I purposefully left as much map unexplored as I could. When I picked the game back up, my character was on horseback, staring off into the distance, a profusion of sound enveloping him, chirping and buzzing and whinnying. This is what the world sounds like when left to its own devices. I took it all in for a few moments. The game's score kicked in momentarily, and then thought better of it. My horse began galloping into a field, racing alongside wild horses, staring out at the great wide open. Buffalo clumped together like so many boulders, snowy mountains partially obscured by low-hanging clouds, utility poles dotting the land like a smattering of crucifixes. The sky seemingly content to move forward ceaselessly, whether or not I'm here to play. Oh, how it feels to be in a world so massive. There may not be another studio ambitious enough, self-confident enough, well-funded enough to create a world as precise and impossibly realistic as Rockstar has created. A score composed of sad strings and lonesome whistles and jumping bean twangs. You can progress through a set of wide-ranging missions that place you centrally in the great American experiment with bombast and humor and intrigue, or you can ride your horse down south and camp out along a ridge overlooking a canyon, a river snaking through it like some great serpent lying in wait. Wake up with the sun and head straight for the ruins you can just make out in the distance. The aim of Red Dead Redemption 2 was to provide the realest world money, talent, and human effort could possibly create in the year 2018. What they ended up with was a game that has no rival in terms of the size of the world and its realism, to be sure. Everything from low-lying log bridges stretched across dry riverbeds to mountain ranges the color of anthracite up in the clouds. But it's always more than the sheer size of the world, or its wildlife, or missions, or its scripted events. There's something in the spirit of this game that is difficult to put into words. But if I had to, I'd say that it's like a great big book, made up of 1,000 little stories that you can read in any order, but that fit together and form a strange and beautiful single story.
Barely made it out of Armadillo alive. You ever see a place halfway to being a ghost town? Signs warning needlessly of cholera. The human sign's far more effective. Store is boarded up. An undertaker hammering coffins, trying to make a last few dollars while there are still people around to pay him. Pale-faced folk retching in alleys. One dog whose fur was matted with blood barked at something in the distance and disappeared in the dust. Strange man spoke of the end of days. A shopkeeper told me how difficult it is to keep the smell of death off the stock, but admitting boastfully that he has his ways. I headed to the saloon and ordered a whiskey. The man next to me, so clearly marked by death in appearance and his own admission, said to me the only one in this town without cholera is the shopkeeper. Go figure. I tried to leave, but Someone keeps volunteering a new tale of woe. Grandfather clock against the wall ticks down loudly for all to hear. I left that place and slept under stars like the blood splatter of some god dead long before any of us were ever here. I woke up the next day and realized I missed the band of folks I began this journey with.
In a world where death is an accepted fact of life, it makes sense for one to move in a gang as large as you do. You wonder how it all works, all these pieces, this huge collection of people who carve wood and scribble notes and powder their faces and carry on conversations with or without you being there. A leader whose cracks are starting to show from the very outset. A reverend who sermonizes for minutes on end, his Bible hollowed out to hide a bottle of morphine. An avuncular old codger who passes the days in a drunken stupor. There are women and children in the group as well. Women who transform over time as a means of fighting back against the violent world they find themselves in. There's even the protagonist of the last Red Dead Redemption. In a game full of bold decisions, this strikes me as perhaps its boldest, giving the player the ability to speak to each of these characters every time they enter camp, each with multiple lines, backstories, flaws, a density of writing in a single freestanding work that may not have a rival. And it's good writing too. You can find cleverer writing in 10 minutes with this game than in most 30-hour games. Conversations that continue on from before you even started playing the game. Street-side wisecracks that bring a smile to your face. Genius decisions like having a trio of women in the back of a wagon sing a song to pass the time. The magic of this whole system, hanging behind the scenes like a giant spider web whose individual threads are so finely rendered as to be invisible. There are many advantages, certainly, in operating as a group, rolling out, 6 men deep to rob a train, you an integral part of the procedure. These are people whose memory calls to you when you find yourself alone in the vastness.
Sometimes you come across something that changes the way you think about things. Something you just gotta learn to live with, rattling around inside your brain. Came across this shack with skeletons laid out on bunk beds. Some misguided suicide ritual. Their hooded leader sat up at a table as if some last foolishness had yet to slip from the cracked and hollowed out space where his tongue used to be. I stared at him and the others, trying to find some meaning in it. And then it was dark, and as I felt the urge to leave that place, an alien green light beamed down on all of us through the tattered roof. A UFO that took its time too, surveying the scene like a god, appraising its creation before it shot off to some other planet.
If someone asks you what would be your desert island game, any answer that is not Red Dead Redemption 2 is probably a mistake. And a desert island is perhaps the best place to play this game because, like the best things in life, it requires a lot of time and patience. You're always going to have to see the animations for tearing down your camp or skinning a deer or bending down to pick up an item. This game never wants to be sped up to your pace. Red Dead Redemption 2 forcefully resists any sort of haste. You settle into its rhythm, or you should play something that's more interested in being hurried along. You begin the game trudging through snow that's knee-deep. It's an entreaty to be present, to treat this game like you would a book, racing through sections where the action ramps up, and slowing down in parts where there is a need to comprehend how the language is working. Look around the world and be content with its pace. Walk into a store and look at the shelves stocked with biscuits and bourbon and shotgun shells. Listen to the shopkeeper behind the counter who seems to never run out of things to say as you flip open a catalog meticulously illustrated with pictures of canned pineapples, ground coffee, and cocaine gum, and advertisements entreating you not to be cruel to your horses. Spend time in rooms with peeling paisley wallpaper and faded wood paneling, dust filtering through the light beams of a steadily rising sun, entire histories rendered out in black and white photos, paintings of ships passing each other in the night, or brooding women, or bowls of spilling fruit, or steam engines, or waterfowl. Go into the mountains and camp out during a snowstorm. Stand at the top of a cliff overlooking a valley and spot a rainbow that fades away so fast as to make you doubt your own eyes.
Got into it pretty bad with some smugglers. Just wanted to see what kind of operation they were running, but one of them caught me sneaking in a house where I shouldn't have been. Had to get out of there in a hurry. Ended up in the desert. Happened upon a group dressed in robes. They sat in a circle, their heads bowed low as if in prayer. No words passed from their lips. They had been forsaken in some way, stuck around too long trying to figure out which. Sandstorm started kicking up. Mountain lion came up and startled my horse. I hit the ground with an answer to my question, and I seemed destined to a fate that was just the same as those departed pilgrims. I pulled out 2 pistols and laid that creature to rest. The moon, red and angry, like the eye of a tormented cyclops. I rode until dawn to someplace far from there.
There is a quality of teaching about plants and animals and guns and ways of life that have long been outmoded. You go on a journey with a companion, camping out together and getting up the next day to track down some monstrous bear. This is clearly the tutorial for the game's hunting mechanic, but it doesn't feel like a tutorial because it is so generous in what it provides. Information about members of your group, the chance to camp out, maybe for the first time, and then the opportunity to hunt a legendary animal with a charming partner who has stories and tips in abundance. The 2 of you versus a huge bear with one eye deadened, who you can empty your bullets into and turn his snarling face into a hat. They have simultaneously taught you the how and the why of hunting in this game. You can head into unsettled territory and get up early in the morning, following the tracks of some creature spoken about by folks with fear and reverence. Lay out bait and let him have it when the time is right. Do this and you can have some of the coolest items in the game and survive with the story to tell. The game brilliantly uses its world to add dynamism to its missions. Wide open country and interior spaces rendered just so, sticking up moving trains, A snake oil pushing charlatan who has a bounty on his head can jump into a river when confronted and be pushed along by its current as you race after him on your horse. A long night of drinking in a packed bar that has you combing through the crowd to find your friend who keeps disappearing, only to have him come up from behind and initiate a slap fight as the whole bar eggs you on. The night liquor pushing you further and further into deviancy until you're trying to drown a man in a trough and being chased by the same lawmen you aided earlier. You wake up in the morning in a whole different area from where you last remember being. There are hideouts teeming with bandits, which lead to shootouts, where you are meant to take refuge behind naturalistic cover, a copse of trees or a crumbling staircase, the terrain constantly giving, places to hide, places to discover, places that hold secrets.
Gain to a little house in the dead of night. Look friendly enough. Light from a lantern cast a welcome glow through the fog. Tried knocking, but nobody was coming to the door, so I kicked it in. Inside, a whole family, grave-faced and unmoving, slumped over kitchen tables and laid back in rocking chairs. Mother, father, child, grandpa and grandma alike, and some deep sleep that came on suddenly and became permanent. No gunshot or act of violence, something the house itself had a hand in. That one room, still as a portrait I do not care to take another look at.
This is a game that loves the written word, that indulges in it. Characters sitting on stumps with an open book in their hands, arriving in a new town and buying a newspaper with tiny print advertisements for hair tonics and worm syrups. I enjoyed the sensation of leisurely poring over Arthur Morgan's journal on my iPad, seeing his pencil-drawn illustrations of maps and trains and deer and men at work and women gossiping and blind prophets and evocative landscapes. Reading his thoughts about the expansion of cities, feelings of self-doubt, of loss and astonishment creates this rich internal dialogue that splits Arthur in two, video game protagonist and novel protagonist. As a reader of this journal, you are able to understand more about this character and this world than you would ever be able to in another game of this type. You can ignore this aspect of the game altogether, and I imagine most people do. But doing so would mean missing one of its most rewarding parts. So much happens in this game, and in life, that it is worth writing these things down as a way to take some control over the relentless flow of time. Red Dead Redemption 1 sought in many ways to evoke a cinematic tradition, the grand western playing out in 70mm. Red Dead Redemption 2 has these moments to be certain, but it is just as concerned with carving out a place in a grand literary tradition. There are aspirational texts about manifest destiny and tomes written in the vein of one of the great Russian novelists, alongside schlocky British romance novels and dime westerns. It is Cormac McCarthy, it is Clint Eastwood, but it is also expanding on our Western mythology and adding to it all the while. This game respects the importance of folklore and seeks to create some of its own. Heartbroken specters and rambling ghost trains and morality tests from higher powers who appear to us as men. And the game, too, understands something fundamental about ordinary moments that have the quality of transcendence. Sitting by a fire with your companions as a fog thickens around the camp. Men emboldened by the drink in their bellies and the peculiarity of the flickering flame, pulling something from themselves that lay dormant on any other occasion, telling the stories that define their personal mythologies.
Our job is to make a better world for ourselves.
Met two of the devil's most loyal employees last night. Some infernal pig farm. Place where you could scream and nobody would hear you, save for the ones making you scream. This slovenly couple invited me in for supper. Should have left that place when I found human remains in an armoire and a family photo with the parents' eyes scratched out. But I stayed thinking I could take these two easily if need be. I realized that they were brother and sister, some sort of sinful backcountry union. Perhaps I underestimated the cunning of the devil as I fell victim to his trickeries. They poisoned me at the dinner table and left me for dead under a pile of bodies. What they didn't account for was me waking back up. Oh, the looks on their faces when I came back for them. Almost worth being left for dead in the first place.
There is a great tension in this game of the open space shrinking by the day, of technology and organizations rendering an outlaw lifestyle incompatible with the modern world. You can see this play out throughout the course of the game. One world disappearing while another comes into focus. In-game writers who are trying to pull first-hand testimonies from legendary cowboys before they slip from this world and our history like grains of sand through outstretched hands. Throughout the world, there are men doing the work required to keep the wheels of expansion ceaselessly turning, felling trees and building houses and railroads and pumping oil out from the ground. Cities are a breeding ground for disease of a literal and moral sort. Arguments don't tend to de-escalate. Men fend off their appetites or give in to them or fall asleep dead drunk on tables as the night unwinds and leaves them behind in its grand plan. Murders happen behind closed doors and right out on the street. But cities are also hotbeds for entertainment and culture, where you can enter into the tent of a magic lantern show, fresh in town for a well-attended viewing of some aggrandizing colonialist propaganda, or go shopping at an upscale retailer whose suits are fine enough in quality to make a gentleman out of a pack horse. The game never makes a grand show of some of its most impressive moments, chance encounters that are not even marked off on the map, but materialize at random and bewilder as if some advanced sorcery. These short stories, these miniature movies, play out so vividly. A cuckold husband getting tossed through a saloon's glass window and beaten to death in the street by the other man, who heads back in to have another drink when he's done. A torso hung by the wrists underneath train tracks, a lantern flickering nearby to illuminate this gruesome tableau in full, the blood still dripping. being invited into the home of murderous pig farmers.
What does a man think of at the end? Maybe a better man could close his eyes and see a stream of happy images unspooling like thread from his memory bank. Family and friends and the satisfaction of being a man people relied on. I close my eyes and I feel like I didn't amount to what I ought to have had. I see friendships that got contaminated by the bluster of a man we trusted. I see mistakes I made all so clearly now and wonder why I could not recognize them as mistakes while they were happening. And I see country, wide open country, stretching on forever and leaving me behind.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is the culmination of a mass human effort to create the real world in a game as closely as the limitations of that proposition would allow. How much you enjoy this open world will depend on how much you enjoy a game that wants to be as realistic as possible, as novelistic as possible. This was their attempt to create a world parallel to ours, alike in its strangeness and multiplicity, with beauty and revolt in equal measure, something that is awe-inspiring and inimitable, packed with stories too numerous to retell, but worth all the effort of trying nevertheless. I stand on the edge of a cliff at night and raise my head to the stars, which are infinite and incomprehensible, and birds swoop low over a winding river as an owl coos from some even better vantage. I trace the horizon as the moon waxes and wanes. Smoke from some distant fire rises over darkened hills. I don't know what I'll find when I get there, but I'm already on my way